basket full of posies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down.
Welcome to the 112th episode of the Supernatural Occurrence Studies Podcast.
So somewhat paranormal.
My name is Jason Knight, host of the show, and with me via Skype is
Oscar Spector,
producer extraordinaire and podcast co-host. Well, listeners, we are recording this episode via Skype because Oscar and I, by law, can't be together this evening, and probably for the foreseeable future, as we're recording these podcasts, cannot be together, so they will be Skype. Same for Patreon. We're sorry, Patreon supporters, but we are under a shelter-in-place order. Tonight's topic is timely and topical. Pandemics. We're in the mix, in the middle of one right now. So this is what we have to do. Isn't that right, Oscar?
Unfortunately, yes. Also, do you predict this being super long?
So we're on, I gotta be careful, right? I don't want to reveal my location, but we just went on lockdown 2 days ago, and the governor is saying at least 30 days. And I've already been shelter in place for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
As per work. So I don't see this ending anytime soon, unfortunately. Of course, we're talking about coronavirus, COVID-19. It's a bad situation, man. It is a bad situation.
Yeah.
So we're going to do the best we can. Please forgive any audio imperfections. It's not the way we like to record, but we have to keep the show rolling. So, Oscar, how are you doing over there with your shelter-in-place order?
I'm so bored. and yet, this is a good time to be a gamer.
Oh, playing games.
Lots of games. I've been playing, been playing Don't Starve with Lexi online, which is a very time-consuming game, thankfully. I got a Switch recently, a Nintendo Switch, and I've been playing Pokemon Sword and other games on there, and I've been playing Nier Automata, which is a PlayStation game, and it's been a lot of gaming and a little bit of writing too, though, with Lexi.
Good.
She and I wrote 2 short stories for funsies. Really nifty little device we're doing it on too, but that's for another time.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been whatever. I've been staying in, obviously. I go out just to be out, but I go out by myself, in a car, just to keep the engines going on the car or something.
Need some fresh air, need some sunlight.
Yeah, it's been really annoying, especially without Lexi here. That's the worst part in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I've been here. I'm with family, and everyone's good here.
Good.
Everyone's very nonchalant compared to others. To how others are acting about it, or others feel. But, it's not like we're exposing ourselves either. We're just hanging out, casual.
Yeah. I could hear you're playing with a fidget spinner. Is that what that is?
Yeah. You can hear that, huh?
Super loud.
Super loud, huh?
Could you edit that out later? I don't know.
No, probably not, but I'll put it away.
Well, that was my subtle nudge. That
I don't think that was very subtle.
Oh, what are you drinking there?
Soko with Pepsi.
Southern Comfort. I like me some Southern Comfort.
Yeah. Soko with Pepsi. And it's, I've been drinking more, too.
Yes.
Been watching more movies. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of the same here. We've been hunkered down for almost 2 weeks now. The day drinking is getting earlier and earlier. This is a fact. Today, my company had a virtual happy hour.
You're kidding.
On Microsoft Teams. So we were all on video, and we were all getting shit-faced with one another, but from afar. And our boss, our whole team was on there. Our wives and kids jumped on, and everyone got to meet each other. It was actually a lot of fun, but I did a lot of drinking during that virtual happy hour.
Yeah.
So I'm drinking water right now. But no, it's just, we're trying to do our part to obviously not catch COVID-19 and not spread COVID-19. We're stocked up on food. We have fast internet, thank God. A lot of movies. My wife, being a teacher, she's got a lot of activities for the kids. We came up with a scheme to get them to do chores and exercise and read and do schoolwork, where every activity equates to a dollar amount in Monopoly money.
Yeah.
And at the end of the week, we take 5% of the Monopoly money's total, and we put it on Amazon for them so they can then shop on Amazon.
Yeah.
Now, if they'll ever get their packages, I don't know. We're not going to tell them that.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for batteries for my security cameras for over 2 weeks, and these are freaking batteries. I could have just went to the store and gotten them.
Yeah.
So we don't know if they're going to get the packages, but it does work, and it keeps them occupied. And, it's a little bit different for me being on lockdown than my wife. If I'm not at work, I'm not doing the podcast. I'm actually a very private, quiet person. I don't like a lot of people around me unless they're my close friends or family.
Yeah.
So to me, this is the way I like to live. I like to live low-key and quiet. Katie, she wants to get out there. She wants to go places, and same with the kids. But so that's a little bit difficult to manage. But otherwise, it's overall, it's the craziest thing I've ever experienced. Our parents never experienced anything like this. I don't think our grandparents experienced anything like this.
I'm pretty sure grandparents did. A little bit.
Doing research for this show, it doesn't seem like it.
Oh, I got it. I got something in research that
Did you?
I would say that grandparents have gone through.
Really?
Not parents, maybe, but grandparents.
Yeah. So it's just a strange time. A lot of my partners at work, the companies I deal with, are laying off people. They're in threat of shuttering their doors because there's no business. It's very scary times. I'm lucky. I'm blessed. I still have a check coming in. Thank God for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
But you, Oscar, you experienced something crazy. The listeners know you work at Starbucks.
Yeah.
And your Starbucks actually closed.
Yeah, mine is not a drive-through. So at one point, it went from like a regular day, 5 a.m. till 9:30, and then they told us close at 5:30 p.m. Right? No, first off, before that, it was carry out only. So people would come in to just get their drink and then leave right away. No one could stay.
Oh.
Right. And then that turned into the shorter hours where it was till 5:30. And then that turned into all of my kind of stores shutting down. Only drive-thrus open, and they're only open till like 5 or 6.
Wow.
Drive-thru only. Yeah.
But you were lucky. They paid you for an additional month.
Yes.
Isn't that right? Yeah, very lucky. A lot of people weren't that lucky, man.
I know, especially like if you're a server.
Yeah. Restaurants, bars, non-essential business, right?
Yeah.
Those people are in big trouble.
Yeah.
Those people are in big trouble. Never thought.
Yeah, and I have help here too. Like I have, like my parents are taking a dip too because they do sales also, but they're their own businessmen. So like they sell around the city. So they're just doing a lot through phone, but obviously it's taking quite a dip, right? Yeah. And that kind of thing because it's not essential. It's just like beauty products for my mom. She sells a lot. She makes all her money that way. She makes a lot, but yeah. And then my brother is an essential personnel. He works for TSA.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So he still has a job.
Thankfully.
Yeah. But he has to still go in, you know what I'm saying? He has to be there in the airport.
Wow. Yeah. Not a good time.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can bring something interesting this evening to listeners, give them a little break from their shelter-in-place order.
Yeah.
Give them something fun. Not fun, because this isn't a fun topic, but something interesting. How about that?
Yeah, let's go with that. The sales for Contagion have gone up too, like the movie.
I'll tell you, Katie came up with this fantastic idea 2 nights in a row. I want to watch Outbreak, and I want to watch Contagion.
I saw both too.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, both of them fantastic movies. But it is shocking how close to reality what we're dealing with right now, the movie Contagion, is.
Right?
It is amazing how accurate it is to what we're experiencing right now.
That movie really holds up. That was like 10 years ago.
It does. So listeners, check out Contagion. If you're bored after that, check out Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman.
See, I didn't like that movie. I saw it again. I saw it yesterday or the day before. That movie does not hold up. They try to make an action movie out of a disease.
Yeah.
They can't.
No, fair enough. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
We enjoyed it, but check it out.
Moments, though.
It's amazing how real, true to life it is. What else? What else has been happening? I had something, but it just flitted out of my mind.
It did. Is that what I saw leave?
Yes.
I saw something leave. We're on video, so
we are doing video this time, so we can try to watch for our cues in the script.
Yeah.
Try to make it a little more seamless.
A little bit.
But damn it, Oscar! I forgot what I was going to say. This is horrible.
Yeah, but do you have like a favorite snack? Like, are you buying or eating different food now that you're stuck at home?
So, funny story. Remember how I was so sick from my California trip, the food poisoning? Yeah. And I said it reset something in my body?
Yeah.
I'm still on the health kick. Still eating lots of fruits and vegetables and portion control and, just doing good on that, man.
Good.
I was either going to come out of this 20 pounds heavier or 20 pounds lighter. So
yeah, I'm
going for the lighter side. How about you?
Oh, I'll be doing the same things. I mean, I don't eat food out though anymore. So that's probably going to be better then.
Better on the body, better on the pocketbook too.
On the pocketbook, yeah, that's a big one. Before, like, my main expenses, other than like whatever bills I have, which is credit card or car or whatever, is were gas and food. Like when I go out and eat food, usually with Lexi, and not only is Lexi out of the equation, so I have to buy for her, but I don't have to buy it for myself either. So I just go to the grocery store like once a week to fill up, I guess.
Yeah.
But I still have like lots of things. I still have cereal. I still have like nuts, like cashews. I'm a big cashew guy. Oh, yeah. I still have protein bars,
Hey, silver linings. Saving money.
Yeah, so I'm going to be saving some money. And I have backups here. Like, I know I won't go like homeless or anything, unlike a lot of people who are having trouble with right now.
Yeah.
But, I'm in a lucky place for sure. And I've been helping around the house too. And I clean my bathroom top to bottom.
Look at you.
Just because it was there.
Oh, that's it. You just reminded me what I was going to talk about.
What was it?
So you were talking about chores that you haven't done before, right? Because now you're on lockdown.
Well, I don't often clean my bathroom. I should always do it, but I make it wait too long sometimes. So
gotcha. What I was going to tell you is that I did something fun early this evening. I was on another podcast being interviewed for a podcast called Travel Stories. And you can find Travel Stories on all the podcast catchers, iTunes, and so forth. But it's hosted by a good friend of mine, Steve Frick. And the premise of the podcast is snippets from the life of a road warrior, a travel guy, someone who travels for business, right?
Yeah.
He's been a road warrior for the last 20-something years, so he talks about, tips and tricks on how to navigate different airports all over the country, stuff about hotels, where to eat in certain cities, where not to eat, things like this, right? It's a really cool little podcast. I'll leave links in the episode show notes to Travel Stories, but he wanted to do a special episode on road warriors who now find themselves just locked to a desk at home, your lifestyle coming to a screeching halt and how people like us deal with it. So he had a lot of great questions, what was a point of frustration for you since being on house arrest, basically? What new foods have you cooked? What chores have you done that you just kept putting it off because you're a road warrior? And, just all these great questions. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to he's going to give me the audio file. I think I'm going to put it up on Patreon so people could hear that interview. But it turned out really well. I had a lot of fun doing it. So
Nice.
Travel Stories, the podcast. Check it out.
That's very cool. How do you find you? Someone you know before?
Yes, and someone I know. Yes.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. But
yeah.
Anywho, I have a story that I wanted to share with the listeners. It has nothing to do with epidemics, so I wanted to put it in the intro here.
Yeah.
And you don't know what it is.
Nope.
I told you I wanted to surprise you with it. So before we get into the contact info, I want to tell you a grim little story.
Okay.
You ready? So, back on October 12th, 2019, an 18-story Hard Rock hotel that was being built in New Orleans over on Canal Street, its upper floor collapsed, killing 3 workers who were on the job. The collapse was so bad, rescue workers were only able to retrieve one of the bodies. So to this day, this very day, 2 workers' remains are still inside that collapsed hotel. How fucked up is that?
Yeah.
Business and partying still goes on. People walk by that area all day long. Mardi Gras just happened, sea of people. And there's 2 fucking bodies still inside this hotel. And to make matters worse, in late January of this year, 2020, a tarp that had been secured to the remains of the building to hide from the public a body that was visible from the street blew off from high winds, exposing for all to see, all of New Orleans to see, all the tourists to see, 2 dangling legs hanging out the side of the building. The legs, the legs are wearing dark-colored, heavy-duty looking pants or jeans, just like a construction worker would wear, and the feet still have workers' boots on them. And here's the real kicker. Authorities still cannot get to the body to remove it and lay it to rest and bring closure to the poor family.
Huh.
Now, another tarp was hung to conceal the legs, but not before pictures of the legs started circling the internet, along with a huge public outcry against the city of New Orleans to do something. Now, it looks like the hotel will be imploded sometime in April, at which time the bodies can finally be removed. But with COVID-19, those plans might be put off even further.
Yeah.
So these legs are still hanging out the side of the Hard Rock Hotel on Canal Street in New Orleans, covered by a skimpy tarp.
Yeah.
Now, I have a link in the show notes to a picture of the legs if you really want to see it.
Yeah.
But, just please be warned. The picture, it's pretty unpleasant if you know the story.
Yeah.
So, listeners, if you want to see it, check the show notes. But how fucked up is that?
Yeah, that's really fucked up. What do you think that's a cause of? Like, you think that's like a city problem?
It is. Yeah. Yeah, it's all locked up in litigation. Who's at fault? Insurance is involved. It's just one big ball of red tape.
Do you think it should just be like admitted that it's like it's in a spot where we can remove it?
Well, that's what they've said to the city. But dude, you got to do something. You can't have this guy's legs dangling out for everyone to see.
Well, that's the thing, is that what's the harm in that? If you can't get it out, what is there supposed to do, right?
They got to figure out a way. It's completely disrespectful. There's a family in New Orleans whose family member's legs is hanging out the side of a destroyed building. That's horrible.
I know, but if you can't get it out,
there's got to be a way.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they have.
There's got to be a way. I don't know.
You would think so, but
I don't
maybe
know
there
the intricacies of all the litigation and the structure itself.
I mean, ultimately,
how
it's
secure
just
it is, but that's fucked up.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, but I know why people think it's fucked up, but it's I'm just asking because at the risk of how much money or effort or maybe even lives, if it's that dangerous to get it out, are you willing to put just to hide the legs from the view of others?
I don't know. If they could get up there and secure a tarp, there's got to be something more they could do. I mean,
right? Yeah, you would.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm not a structural analyst, but Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know how that problem would be solved. So I don't know if that's a capability we have. I'm sure we have it, but that's the thing is this one of those things we assume that we have the ability to do, or do we just assume because we make crazy things out there, right?
Right. Yeah. So I wanted to share that little tidbit. New Orleans is near and dear to my heart, so I thought that was an interesting story to share.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
Are you yawning?
I was.
This is earlier. This is earlier than we usually record.
I'm just sitting on my bed, so
yeah.
It's my comfort place. It's different. And when I go to your house, it's different.
Yeah. Well, contact info. We'll keep it short. Listeners, visit ChicagoGhostPodcast.com. ChicagoGhostPodcast.com to get to all of our social media sites, to stream the podcast, to view pictures and video and a blog, and visit our sponsors. Everything could be done off of ChicagoGhostPodcast.com. One thing I do want to mention, however, is support our Patreon. We put a lot of hard work and effort into the show. One way to support us is to join our Patreon. That's patreon.com/Supernatural Occurrence Studies Podcast. And for just $5 a month, you could receive ad-free podcast episodes as well as Patreon-only podcast episodes. Those are episodes that you will not hear on our regular podcast feed. And we have a whole bunch of Patreon-only episodes up there right now for you to listen to if you join. So go to patreon.com/Supernatural Occurrence Studies Podcast and pledge your support for the show. We would appreciate it long time.
Wow.
Nice and short that time.
Yeah, was shorter.
All right, Oscar, should we take a quick break?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
Listeners, welcome back to the show. Well, the lights are turned down low.
Not for me.
The candle is lit.
My drink is flowing.
The birthday candle. The ceremonial candle is lit, and Oscar's SoCo is flowing. Mm-hmm. Let's start this show. So, as I mentioned in the intro, this is a very topical episode. Pandemics. We're in the middle of one right now, and we are going to talk about COVID-19. Just want to warn the listeners, this is going to be a long episode. We put a lot of research and time to bring you 6 different pandemics that have scarred the world over the past, mine goes back to the 1300s, so for a very long time.
Yeah.
I can't do mental math right now.
One of mine goes back to Roman times.
Oh, yours is older than mine then.
Yeah, but it's not like a big portion of it. But yeah.
That's okay. So this is going to be a long episode. Strap yourselves in, because this is quite a ride.
Yeah.
All right. So I thought, I was trying to come up with how do we really preface the pandemics, especially COVID-19, because that's the first one I talk about since we're in the mix right now. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of panic out there right now because this is so new to everybody. what we're experiencing. So I thought we should start with sort of explaining the difference between a state of emergency versus a shelter-in-place order versus martial law.
Okay. Who's Marshall?
Yes, Marshall's an asshole. I'll get to that.
Marshall's a dick.
So that's where I thought I would start, and then I'm going to roll into all the facts and figures on COVID-19. Okay.
Exactly. Okay.
So, state of emergency. So far, nearly all U.S. states have declared a state of emergency due to coronavirus. Illinois, where me and Oscar are from, Oscar and I, declared a state of emergency on March 9th, 2020. And on March 13th, President Trump declared a national state of emergency because of coronavirus. Now, by declaring a national state of emergency, President Trump, with those 4 words, freed up somewhere around $50 billion in federal aid from the Disaster Relief Fund, which would allow the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, to tap into those funds to mobilize FEMA personnel to quickly mobilize and start to help those in need immediately.
Right.
Now, I know this might sound a little scary, declaring a national state of emergency, but declaring a state of emergency doesn't mean people are being round up and forcibly quarantined or anything like that. We have another measure to do that, which I'll talk about here in a few. A state of emergency declaration doesn't even necessarily restrict people's movements or force the closing of businesses or the banning of people from gathering in groups. Instead, a state of emergency, more than anything else, is a strategic move, which helps set regulations aside so that necessary help can get to those who need it quickly.
Yes.
It's a way to swiftly cut through governmental red tape and bureaucracy. Declaring a state of emergency helps activate local emergency response plans and local emergency operation centers. It helps state and local governments receive funds and reimbursements from the federal government for money spent on preparedness or money to spend to battle the issue at hand, like to deploy additional personnel or buy equipment and prepare stockpiles. In regards to coronavirus specifically, like most of us are experiencing right now, why Oscar and I couldn't meet to record this podcast, declaring a state of emergency could also give federal, state, and local leaders the opportunity to enact restrictive measures to help stop the spread or the shedding of the coronavirus. One of these restrictive measures is something called shelter in place. Now, shelter in place means to stay in your home and not leave unless for a designated exception. It's an order to stay in the structure in which one resides, instead of evacuating the area or seeking out a public shelter. During a shelter-in-place order, the danger isn't being outside, like, say, during a chemical spill or a chemical attack. The danger is being around other people. And if you absolutely must go out during a shelter-in-place order, you may leave your home if you're exercising what's known as the 5 essential activities. And I wanted to outline those 5 essential activities here.
Yeah.
So activity 1, you can leave your home to perform necessary tasks for the health and survival of someone in the home. This also extends to the health and well-being of pets. Activities like going for medicine, visiting a doctor, buying groceries, or picking up supplies to work from home are all okay to do under Essential Activity 1. Then there's Essential Activity 2. You could leave your home to obtain necessary supplies or to deliver supplies to someone else to ensure their health and well-being. Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Essential Activity 3. You could leave your home for outdoor activities like running or hiking. In other words, exercise. It's permitted as long as it's done while maintaining something called social distance.
Yeah.
So in other words, no hiking clubs or running clubs. during the shelter-in-place order. You can do it yourself and maintain social distancing. And here's where we should talk about social distancing. This is a word that's being thrown all over the media, right?
Yeah.
Social distancing doesn't eliminate a virus like coronavirus. Instead, it makes a virus easier to deal with. It's a way of reducing the viral impact on society by limiting personal contact. Social distancing includes avoiding crowded places like bars, restaurants, concerts, school, the mall. And if you do have to go out for one of the 5 essential activities, stand at least 6 feet away from another person. Don't shake hands. Wash your hands often with soap for at least 20 seconds. And if you have to sneeze or cough, do it into the crook of your elbow or into your sleeve, not your hands, and definitely not into the open air. Social distancing is all about preventing or severely limiting virus shedding or the spreading of a virus.
Right.
Make sense?
Yep.
Now, essential activity 4, you could leave your home to care for another person, maybe an elderly parent located somewhere else. And essential activity 5 states you could leave your home to perform work at what's called an essential business. Businesses considered essential can be in the healthcare sector, businesses that provide food, and public service operations, garbage men, for example. Also on the essential business list are media services like the newspapers, TV, and radio. And the same goes for first responders, law enforcement, and emergency management personnel. And truck drivers are on this list as well. Basically, any business that helps society chug along is exempt from a shelter-in-place order.
And Starbucks for some reason.
And Starbucks too, some of those, yeah. And so breaking a shelter-in-place order is considered a misdemeanor and is punishable by a fine, imprisonment, or both.
Yeah.
Although I couldn't find an example of someone actually being prosecuted for breaking our shelter-in-place order thus far.
Yeah.
So there's that. That's good news, I guess. And so far, pretty much the entire country, every state, has a shelter-in-place order in effect right now. And it seems each state is kind of on its own as to when the order ends. I've heard mid-April. Oh,
really?
Yeah, mid-April. I've heard all through April. I've even heard it could go until sometime in May in certain states.
Huh.
All I know is that me and my family, we've been hunkered down for over a week and a half. Yeah. We have a ton of food. We've been limiting our exposure to going to grocery stores and having my mom over for dinner. Now, my mom, she's been working from home for about a week and a half, just like me, so I'm not worried about her having been exposed. Our kids are home from school indefinitely, as is my wife, who's a teacher. And indefinitely is how the school district put it. We don't know what indefinitely means.
Right.
But that's the way they put it. So for us, it's just a matter of riding this thing out and doing our part not to catch and spread coronavirus. Now, before we actually get into coronavirus and other horrible pandemics, we should talk a little bit about martial law. Because, social media. There have been rumors galore all over social media. Maybe you've even received a text message from a friend that said they know a guy who knows this other guy whose brother's in the military, and he heard. Well, you get the picture.
Right.
The rumors going around say that the military is coming into your city, in our case, Chicago, and will enforce mandatory quarantine or mandatory shelter-in-place laws. In other words, according to social media, martial law is upon us.
Right.
Now, it is a fact Illinois has called in the National Guard, as has New York and California. Tents are popping up in strategic areas in Chicago. Are they going to be detention centers, coronavirus testing sites, something else? We're not really sure yet. Now, if it is true and martial law is coming down, this is the one we have to worry about. President Trump has deployed at least 7,300 National Guard members to all 50 states to help with the coronavirus pandemic. As it is right now, guardsmen and women are doing mundane tasks, helping at drive-through coronavirus testing sites. They're passing out food supplies, or they're teaching emergency responders how to properly use and decontaminate emergency equipment.
Yeah.
But the National Guard, as they're deployed right now, are under the control of state governments. And governors have a pretty wide leeway to use their guardsmen how they see fit, including acting as a policing agency, with full authority to do whatever normal law enforcement does, including being armed, using necessary force, and arresting people. Seeing uniformed soldiers can be a scary thing for citizens, considered we're all under a stay-at-home order. That, and the pictures circulating the internet showing trains riding through the United States carrying military vehicles. To some, this is absolute proof martial law is about to come hammering down. Never mind that, here in the Midwest, a huge plant in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, called the Oshkosh Corporation, manufactures certain types of military vehicles and regularly ships them out on train across the U.S. because trains are the most convenient, economical way to transport such large vehicles in quantity. But because of the times we're in, people see the trains carrying military gear and automatically think something nefarious is going on. Now, I can tell you, I've seen these trains a bunch of times. It's just business as usual.
Yeah.
But what do I know? I do know that about 60 National Guard members have been activated in Illinois, and a majority of them are in Chicago. For now, they're doing regular jobs trying to help curb the Rona. But if people get out of hand, that can change very quickly. So, what's so bad about martial law? What is martial law? Well, to quote California Governor Gavin Newsom, quote, "If you want to establish a framework of martial law, which is ultimate authority and enforcement, we have the capacity to do that. But we are not feeling at this time, at this moment, this is necessary," end quote. And I think that's the general sentiment from all governors at this point. They have the power and capacity to do it, to enact martial law, but no one wants to see it done. Because put simply, martial law is the replacing of civil rule with temporary military authority in times of crisis. Now, the precedent in the United States holds that under martial law, quote, "certain civil liberties may be suspended, such as the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, freedom of association and freedom of movement, and the writ of habeas corpus," in other words, the right to a trial before imprisonment, "may be suspended," end quote. This is frightening shit. Now, martial law can be declared by the President of the United States, by Congress, and by state governors if it's written in their state's constitution that they have the power to do so.
Is Illinois one of them?
Yes. Now, believe it or not, there are rules to martial law. For example, the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. The Posse Comitatus Act prohibits the Army, the U.S. Army, and other federal branches of the U.S. military from policing its own citizens. The Army won't be busting down your door or stopping you on the streets to search you, nor will the Army be assigned to bust up groups of people during mandatory shelter in place. But the National Guard. The National Guard, since they're state-controlled, can do those things. Hence why everyone is so up in arms about the National Guard being called into action during this coronavirus scare. Now, as an aside, there is one instance when federal branches of the U.S. military can be called in to act against their own citizens with congressional approval. That's called the Insurrection Act, which allows the use of active duty U.S. troops or National Guard troops for federal law enforcement in cases when rebellion against the authority of the United States makes it unfeasible to enforce the laws of the U.S. by the ordinary course of judicial proceedings. We're definitely not at that point with the coronavirus scare yet.
Right.
Now, here's one more reason why people are afraid that martial law might actually happen. It's called the John Warner National Defense Authorization Act. This bill, signed into law in 2006, gives the president the power to take command of the National Guard units under the guise of martial law without the approval of state governors. In other words, President Trump can call martial law and take control of the National Guard and have them do his bidding.
Wow.
Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I personally think it's absurd to think. But considering how polarized people are concerning our commander-in-chief and whether or not he's mentally stable, you can see how some people could think this scenario is a very real possibility and a very real cause for alarm. So, now that we've sort of differentiated between state of emergency, shelter in place, and martial law, let's talk about the hot topic, coronavirus.
Right.
Novel coronavirus, the virus's original name when it was discovered back in December 2019, has been officially renamed COVID-19. That's COVID-19, where CO stands for corona, VI stands for virus, D stands for disease, and the number 19 comes from the year the virus was discovered, December 2019. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's where COVID-19 comes from. Now, you have to understand, coronavirus has been around for a long time. And a little interesting fact here, the word corona and coronavirus actually means crown, because under a microscope, it looks like there's a crown on top of the virus. Cute, right?
Yeah. In Spanish, corona means crown.
Yeah. So our little deadly virus is wearing a crown. Nice. Now, there are many known types of coronavirus. In humans, known coronavirus can cause anything from the common cold to mild respiratory illnesses to severe respiratory illnesses like Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, or Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, or SARS.
Yeah.
That's why if you look on the back of a bottle of disinfectant wipes, like Clorox wipes, one of the things listed that the wipes will fight is coronavirus. Other forms of known coronavirus can affect animals, and a rare but known coronavirus could actually jump from animal to human, making the human sick from coming in contact with an infected animal. The problem with our coronavirus, COVID-19, is that it's a new coronavirus, one experts haven't seen in humans before. Hence the virus's original name, novel coronavirus, right? Some scientists believe novel coronavirus started as that type of coronavirus that can jump from animal to human. And it did just that, and it infected patient 0. From there, it mutated and made its way into the population, although this theory hasn't been proven yet. Another theory states that novel coronavirus started at an open-air wet food market in Wuhan, China. Wet meaning they kill the animals right there in front of you. Bats, snakes, God knows what else, right?
Yeah.
Novel corona could have been in food, probably an animal eaten by patient 0. Patient 0 got sick and it spread from there.
Right.
Although the patient 0, the person experts believe, which is a 55-year-old man from China's Hubei province, who was likely infected with novel corona on November 17th, 2019. Apparently, this unnamed man had no contact with the open-air market in Wuhan, which means if the man Chinese authorities think is patient 0, if he didn't have contact with the open food market in Wuhan, novel coronavirus could have been in the air somewhere in Wuhan. A really scary thought to think that this thing that we're dealing with now is airborne. Or novel coronavirus came into human population in an entirely different way. Biological, maybe, as a weapon, a science experiment gone wrong.
Right.
And I'm not trying to fuel conspiracy fire. I'm just saying no one knows how this pandemic started with 100% certainty. They're still trying to figure it out almost 4 months later. Scary, right? It really is like the movie Contagion.
Yeah. Really is.
Now, what are the symptoms of COVID-19? The symptoms are tricky, and this is part of the problem. So,
Yeah.
first of all, symptoms can appear 2 to 14 days after a person has been infected. And from what we know, even if you're not showing symptoms, you can still spread the illness to others, which again is very scary to think about. So what do we look for?
It's the no symptoms that really is the worst part for me.
Exactly, because you're out there doing your thing, interacting with tons of people. Meanwhile, what happens?
Yeah.
Right? And these numbers I'm going to quote here in a little bit are shockingly scary. All right, but bear with me. Now, according to the CDC, Center for Disease Control, the main symptoms to be on alert for are fever, coughing, and or shortness of breath. Tricky, because that could be anything.
Could be anything.
Yeah, a cold or a flu, for example. Meanwhile, just like you said, Oscar, we're walking around thinking we have this simple cold, and unbeknownst to us, we're infecting everyone we come in contact with COVID-19. Anyway, to elaborate a little more on those main symptoms, according to the CDC, with the fever, we shouldn't fixate on a specific number, a degree. Just know that anything 100 degrees or above is considered fever for both children and adults. And if you think you have the Rona, temperature should be taken in the late afternoon or early evening for the most accurate results. For coughing, you're looking for a dry cough, a cough you can really feel deep down in your chest, one that seems to come from the sternum or the breastbone. It's not a tickle in your throat. And for shortness of breath, it's just that. It's the scary feeling that you can't breathe deep enough to get a good breath. So fever, cough, and shortness of breath, those are common warning signs that you need to pay attention to, especially the shortness of breath. Then there are COVID-19 emergency warning signs, signs that say call for medical attention immediately. Emergency warning signs include difficulty breathing, like I said, persistent pain or pressure in the chest, bluish lips or face, and confusion or extreme fatigue, or the inability to arouse, like you literally cannot get out of bed. You have any of those symptoms? Call a doctor immediately, but call first, so doctors could instruct you where to go in your area to get tested, so you're not just blindly walking into a doctor's office, potentially infecting everyone else in that office and on your way to the office. You know what I mean? So speaking of spreading, how is COVID-19 spread? Well, since COVID-19 seems to be a respiratory virus, most respiratory illnesses are spread by an infected person through what's called large droplets, like from a cough or a sneeze, or even if the infected person exhales. Those large droplets will spread about 6 feet in front of the infected person, and then they'll settle onto nearby surfaces. If another person is within that 6 feet and they breathe in the droplets, or if they touch a surface the droplets have settled on, and then that person touches their eyes or their nose or their mouth, well, that's not good, and the person will likely catch the virus. And it's important to note, we don't yet know exactly how long COVID-19 lasts on surface. It could be a few hours, it could be a few days, it could be a week, more. They're still trying to figure that out. Now, other viruses can be spread through the air, meaning they can suspend in the air in smaller droplets for a longer period of time and travel longer distances. Airborne viruses are really bad. We're not entirely sure if COVID-19 is a large droplet to surface virus or if it's an airborne virus. Officials think it's a large droplet virus, but they're erring on the side of caution and assuming it's airborne and treating it as such until they know more. Hence, that's why we have this social distancing and shelter in place.
Yeah, we need more information still.
Exactly. Now, on Wednesday, March 11th, the World Health Organization, or the WHO, officially declared COVID-19 a pandemic. According to the World Health Organization, a document called COVID-19 Situation Report 66, as of March 26th, so yesterday at the time of this recording, 2020, there are 462,684 cases of COVID-19 worldwide, of which 63,570 are from the United States. Globally, there have been approximately 20,834 deaths due to COVID, of which approximately 884 were in the U.S. Now, just so you know, when I started writing this episode, the first time I ran these numbers was on March 2nd. On March 2nd, the numbers were 266,073 cases worldwide. Today, there are approximately 462,684 cases worldwide, of which 15,219 cases were in the U.S. Today, there are approximately 63,570 cases in the U.S. There have been 12,521 deaths globally. Today, there are approximately 20,834 deaths globally, of which 252 deaths were in the U.S. Today, there are approximately 884 deaths in the U.S. Look at how those numbers exploded in less than a month. And these are the numbers we know about. Remember that patient 0 over in Wuhan? We now know he likely contracted the sickness mid-November 2019, but novel corona wasn't announced until the end of December. That's a lot of time walking around infecting others who are not part of these numbers. And this stuff travels fast with our little global village we got going on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, here in the States, we've had a very bad flu season. According to the CDC, between October 1st, 2019 and February 1st, 2020, approximately 31 million Americans contracted the flu, or the influenza, and upwards of 12,000 or more people died from influenza here in the U.S. More than 12,000 people in 5 months. Any number of those people could have actually had COVID-19 without even knowing it. So, the COVID-19 death toll here in the U.S. could actually be much, much higher. And I bet the same could be said for all over the world. And COVID-19, their tests aren't widely available yet. And places like New York and California won't even test you if you exhibit only mild symptoms of COVID-19. So people don't know if they have a common cold, COVID-19, or something else. I can't even imagine how frustrating that is. People could have all the symptoms, could even die, but unless they're tested, they're not counted in these numbers the World Health Organization puts out. So how accurate are they? Listeners, this is really scary stuff. Now look to the episode show notes for a link to up-to-date World Health Organization COVID-19 situation reports, like the one I quoted. It's very interesting to read and to track. Now, this is important. According to the World Health Organization, it's hard to say. To protect yourself and your loved ones from contracting COVID-19, you must adhere to the following simple guidelines. Wash your hands regularly with an alcohol-based hand rub or with soap and water, and wash for at least 20 seconds. Stay at least 3 feet from someone who is coughing. The more distance, the better. Although, I just read in the New York Post that the safe distance of 6 feet being talked about since the beginning of this pandemic may be entirely wrong. The article I read said that the distance COVID-19 can spread is actually much, much further, like 30 feet from the source. If this New York Post article is correct, there's undoubtedly a ton of people out there in danger of having come in contact with COVID-19. Again, not trying to stoke the fire, but this is what I read. And it's really funny how the government, how these news reports and the government are, they're just not saying airborne. They're saying everything else but airborne, because airborne is bad. All right. And continue now with the guidelines. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. And here's an interesting fact. We touch our face at least 16 to 23 times an hour. Most of us are awake for 10 to 12 hours, so that's about 276 times a day we touch our face, usually without even knowing it. So pay attention to your little tics. your unconscious motions, the lip biting, the fingernail biting, and stop it. Cover your mouth when you cough or sneeze. Cough and sneeze into the crook of your elbow. If you cough or sneeze into a tissue, throw it away immediately. Stay at home and avoid travel if you feel sick. And if you have a fever, cough, and difficulties breathing, seek medical attention immediately. But call your doctor in advance so they can direct you to the right place to avoid making unnecessary stops, which can potentially spread the virus even more. I already said this. And if you've been to an area where COVID-19 outbreaks have occurred, or if you've come in contact with a person who has it, you're to self-isolate for at least 14 days and monitor the symptoms. Even if you have a mild fever, a headache, a runny nose, stay home. If you develop difficulties breathing or a high fever or a bad cough, or God forbid all three, get to a doctor, but please call first. So that's what we know about COVID-19. And be warned, there are a lot of rumors and theories out there. Try not to feed into it. Try to get your information from trusted sources, like the CDC or the World Health Organization. If you feed into rumors, you're going to stress yourself out. Stress lowers the immune system, and, well, you know what happens. Think of it this way. Believe it or not, this pandemic that we're in right now could be much worse. Like, much, much worse. And here's where we're going to segue into talking about other pandemics. And the first one we're going to talk about, I'm going to pass it over to Oscar Spector, is Zika.
But Oscar left the room.
Uh-oh.
No, I'm kidding. All right, Zika fever. Are you ready?
I am ready for this. I don't know much about what you researched, so I'm excited to hear this.
Yes, I found some stuff, and it's not as bad as corona, which I guess is worse for us now. But there you go. Zika, or Zika fever, is a disease caused by the Zika virus, and is spread mainly through mosquito bites. The other way it is spread is through unprotected vaginal, anal, or oral sex.
Yay!
Many, if not most people infected do not receive symptoms, and mild ones are as follows: fever, rash, headache, joint pain, red eyes, and muscle pain. Symptoms can last for several days to a week. People usually don't get sick enough to go to the hospital, and they very rarely die of Zika. Once a person has been infected with Zika, they are likely to be protected from future infections. The horror of the Zika infection, comes during pregnancy, where it can cause a birth defect of the brain called microcephaly. Sorry.
I remember this.
Yes.
I remember hearing this on the news.
A birth defect called of the brain, called microcephaly, and other severe brain defects. Microcephaly is a defect where a baby's head is smaller than expected, often possessing smaller brains that might not develop properly. Zika is also linked to other problems during pregnancy, such as miscarriage, stillbirth, and others.
Wow.
Zika can also exacerbate the Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is an uncommon disease of the nervous system. But that's even more rare, right? The Zika virus became popular in 2015/2016, where it was suspected that more than 500,000 people had it, and that only 18 cases were confirmed fatal.
Only 18, wow. Thank God. Okay.
Right. Zika virus was first discovered in 1947 and is named after the Zika forest in Uganda.
Oh.
In 1952, the first human cases of Zika were detected, and along came the outbreaks that affected tropical parts of Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific Islands. Before 2007, at least 14 cases of Zika had been documented in the U.S., although other cases were likely to have occurred and were left unreported. This is due to the symptoms of Zika, which are similar to those of many other diseases and were unrecognizable. So the number is definitely it's not like, it's not set in stone, but it has to be higher. It's just that people just thought it was something else.
Kind of like Corona.
Right. Yeah, exactly. A lot of these are going to sound similar, actually. When we get to it further down here. Preventative measures are as follows. Wearing clothes like long sleeve shirts and pants, coupled with repellent for mosquitoes. Staying indoors with proper ventilation and screen doors. Lastly, using protection with sexual encounters. Use a condom.
There you go. Public service announcement.
Right. Zika is primarily diagnosed through blood or urine samples. Treating Zika symptoms are not different from more common illnesses. Getting plenty of rest, drinking fluids to prevent hydration, taking medicine for fever or pain, but avoiding aspirin or other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, because apparently that makes it worse. And there is no vaccine for Zika.
Oh.
That's all I got on that.
Okay. I remember Zika with mosquitoes. That's what brings to my mind.
Yeah. It was mainly a scare for pregnant women.
Yeah. And then the babies.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't even use the word, but I remember it going around at the time. Not politically correct, but they would call the babies pinheads.
You're kidding.
Because their heads were misshapen, almost kind of like to a mild point.
Yeah.
Have you seen pictures?
No, I saw a couple, but I didn't see that like that.
Yeah, horrible name, but that's what people were saying because of the appearance of the babies' heads.
That's terrible, yeah.
Almost pointed. Yeah, very sad stuff. So that's what you got on Zika.
Yeah, small one. That's the shortest one I got, and also the least lethal.
Least lethal. Good. So it made sense to start with that one after the hot topic of Corona or COVID.
Right. By the end of this, everyone's going to be infected with something from hearing it.
Yeah. Or at least paranoid as all get out.
Yeah.
Well, I got a nasty one to follow up that one.
Oh, I know. Yours is awful.
We might as well just jump into this one right now.
Wait, but it reminds me, before you say it, I'm going to say something real quick.
Yeah.
Because I told my friend and my friend Luke and my brother Ralph, I told them about what we're going to do for the show, right?
Yeah.
And that I was researching, and I'm like, I can't hang with you guys. I need to, or I can't talk or whatever. I have to research. And they're like, what are we doing? I'm like, I'm reviewing Zika and the other stuff that we'll get to, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, what is Jay doing? And I was like, well, Jay's got the COVID. He's got the one and the two you're about to talk about. I guess I don't know. I'm saving it for suspense.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I'm like, and they started laughing. I'm like, he took the juiciest one. I'm like, yeah, that motherfucker. He took all the best diseases. I'm like, that little piece of shit. He's like, it's my show. That's mine. That one's mine. That one's mine. Well, Oscar, you can have Zika, which 14 people or 18 or whatever. You can have the other ones, And I'm like, thanks for the bones, for the chicken bones you gave me.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, it was just they were laughing. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's kind of funny.
I love those guys.
No, go ahead. So,
all right. Well, we're just gonna jump into the Spanish flu of 1918.
Yeah,
it's an H1N1 virus with genes of avian or bird origin, which I thought was
Oshkosh Bagosh too.
What's that?
Oshkosh genes too.
No. H1N1 virus with genes of bird origin. Very strange.
Yeah.
Now, the Spanish flu of 1918 is the worst pandemic to scar the world in all of modern history. So we're looking at the time period after the Middle Ages, okay?
Yeah, when people started recording history. Think of it that way.
Yeah.
That's one big selling point of the modern, right? Because that's when we started taking down everything, passing records,
Right. Yeah, taking better records and exactly.
Or any.
Now, this strain of influenza, because it is a derivative of influenza, killed indiscriminately. Old, young, sick, healthy.
Yeah.
The Spanish flu is believed to have infected a third of the world's population and was responsible for killing over 50 million people worldwide, the equivalent to 200 million people today. And it really preyed upon people in the prime of their lives, those in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. It was also a devastating sickness for those under 5 years of age, as well as the elderly, people 60 years and above, But the older people tended to fare better than the rest, probably because they'd have been exposed to something similar in the past. Similar, but not exactly the same as the Spanish flu, but similar enough to give people in the older age group a form of resistance.
Or like a buffer.
Kind of, yeah. Now, the name Spanish flu is kind of a misnomer, as the flu isn't thought to have started in Spain. You see, at the time all this takes place, at the end of World War I, Spain was a neutral country and had a lot of freedom when it came to the press and the reporting of news, unlike the war-torn countries, who either had complete press censorship or the news that did come out was seen as just propaganda and not to be trusted.
Yeah.
When a mysterious and deadly flu hit Madrid and Spain's press reported on it, people mistakenly believed Spain was the origin of this mysterious sickness because they were the ones only able to really report on it. And therefore the sickness was incorrectly labeled the Spanish flu. And funny enough, that's what it would be called throughout history.
Yeah.
Actually,
and a lot of people think that way, and they'll,
yeah.
that they blame Spain for it.
Yep, not true.
Like it's anyone's fault. It's all our faults.
Yeah, right.
No country is responsible for anything. Not one person, not one group.
Well, there are two theories as to where the Spanish flu really began, its origins. One theory states that the Spanish flu originated during World War I on the Western Front. So We're talking Belgium, northeastern France, near Alsace-Lorraine, and Luxembourg, West Germany. Soldiers stationed at the Western Front didn't have nice 5-star hotel quality living conditions. To live as a soldier on the Western Front, you lived in crowded, cold, damp, dirty conditions. And most of the soldiers were malnourished, so their immune systems were already in a compromised state. In these conditions, a lot of soldiers became sick with the flu, and the sickness spread among the ranks. Most of the soldiers recovered, but not all. The problem came when these soldiers started returning home during the summer of 1918, not knowing that they were carrying the virus that would spark the Spanish flu pandemic.
Yeah.
Soldiers return home, they reintegrate with the civilian population, and that was it. The flu quickly spread across the soldiers' cities, their towns, and their villages, and ultimately the flu spread across the world and claimed millions upon millions upon millions of lives. That's one theory. Another theory suggests that the Spanish flu actually originated in China, when some 90,000 Chinese laborers called the Chinese Labor Corps were sent to northern France in early 1918 to provide support for the war, dig trenches, build roads, lay tracks, unload trains, rebuild damaged tanks, stuff like that. Most of these Chinese laborers were farmers from remote villages in China, and their journey to northern France was an unpleasant one. The laborers were locked inside sealed train cars for extended periods of time, and by the time the workers arrived in France, some 3,000 were already sick or dying from a mysterious flu.
Wow.
The infected Chinese workers integrated with the soldiers stationed at the Western Front. The soldiers returned to their respective countries, and the rest is unfortunate history.
Yeah.
About 500 million people were infected with the Spanish flu, a third of the global population at the time, and again, over 50 million killed. Keep in mind, all this took place in the span of 2 years, from January 1918 to December 1920. It's estimated that the flu killed 200,000 Americans, actually dropping the average American's life expectancy in 1918 by 12 years. That's just insane.
Yeah.
Now, as for symptoms of the Spanish flu, it typically began with a severe headache combined with lethargy, right? Can't get out of bed, can't get off, you're lethargic. You can't do anything.
Yeah.
A dry, hacking cough would soon develop, along with stomach issues and loss of appetite, followed by bouts of uncontrollable sweating. Other symptoms included hemorrhaging from the mucous membranes, like the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the intestines. In a lot of cases, blood would ooze from the infected person's ears and even their skin. Eventually, respiratory issues would settle in, like pneumonia, and that was it. Once the Spanish flu infected a person's respiratory system, there was little and nothing anyone could do. No chance of recovery.
Yeah, it was a very harsh virus.
Oh, my God. And they would develop quickly. Within mere days of coming in contact with the virus, people would be dead within hours or days from when symptoms first developed. Incredibly aggressive. Now, of course, doctors at the time across the globe were at a loss as to how to treat this new pandemic. Avoid crowded places, close schools, avoid shaking hands, cover your mouth and nose when in public, outlaw spitting in the streets, eat cinnamon, drink wine, drink beef broth, chew a certain kind of mint. All sorts of ideas were presented on how to curb the Spanish flu. And of course, nothing worked. Something interesting to note, doctors were prescribing large doses of aspirin to those suffering with Spanish flu, to the point where people were also dying from complications brought on by aspirin poisoning. Doctors would prescribe up to 30 milligrams of aspirin a day, where today the maximum dosage of aspirin is 4 milligrams. Kind of gives you an idea how much they were prescribing.
Doesn't it also thin the blood?
It does, yeah, aspirin. Like when you're having a heart attack, you take aspirin to thin the blood, get the blood flowing easier.
Yeah.
Between the aspirin poisoning and the Spanish flu, bodies piled up like cordwood, one on top of the other, and so on.
Yeah.
Cemeteries couldn't hold any more bodies. Families were forced to bury their loved ones themselves. It was pure chaos. Eventually, by 1919, 1920, the Spanish flu kind of burned itself out. Everyone who had it was dead, and those who survived it were basically immune, so the virus had nowhere else to go. And so the pandemic of the Spanish flu just kind of ended. The Spanish flu has reared its ugly head a few times since 1918. These instances weren't as bad, only a couple million people killed. And I'm not going to get into those outbreaks. Listeners, you can look it up. But yeah, Spanish flu, fucking horrible. And they call it the forgotten pandemic because a lot of the news of the pandemic was overshadowed by the war, and records weren't kept well back then. So they call it the forgotten pandemic. But we got to remember this shit.
I mean, it's pretty well known now. I mean, people know it as a shorthand overall.
Now, the next one we're going to talk about actually has some similarities to the Spanish flu. Isn't that right?
I don't know. Is that right? Is that your cue?
That is my cue. The swine flu, H1N1.
I'm destroying the fourth wall by just pointing it out.
Yeah.
Yes. Swine flu and stuff. You'll see. Or swine flu is really called swine influenza, I guess. Influenza is a key word here, guys. Swine flu is a respiratory infection that began in 2009, caused by an influenza strain that started in pigs. It is spread 3 different ways: by airborne respiratory droplets such as coughs or sneezes, by touching contaminated surfaces like counters or doorknobs, and by saliva like kissing or sharing a drink. Symptoms include fever, cough, sore throat, chills, and body aches, as well as headaches and shortness of breath. Sounds familiar, right?
It really does.
Right. Specifically, people may experience the following: pain in the muscles, coughs that can be dry, we'll come with that again.
Wow.
Whole body chills, diarrhea, nausea, and vomiting. So already it sounds like every other thing we talked about.
Yeah.
Anyway, the estimated number of people infected in the epidemic was 61 million in the U.S. and caused 12,469 deaths. The worldwide number of deaths reached up to 575,400.
No kidding.
I mean, the grand scheme of things, it's a blip. It's nothing. But, yeah. Death occurred for various reasons. Pregnant women, compromised immunity, or chronic illness such as asthma, diabetes, emphysema, or heart conditions were the key targets, the high-risk targets for swine flu.
Wow.
Yeah. The true origin of the strain came from long ago, as you said, because it's yours.
Yeah, the H1N1.
Yeah. in a sea of various strains or mutations as influenza is spread amongst people and animals around the world. Remember that the normal but annoying influenza or the flu is passed around roughly 500 million people annually. Mm-hmm. That's the normal flu. We get it every year.
Yep.
Swine flu is the little nephew of the deadly Spanish flu from the early 20th century. Swine influenza is a respiratory, this is what it really is, where it started, right? Swine influenza is a respiratory disease of pigs caused by a type A influenza virus that regularly caused outbreaks within the pigs. Swine flu viruses do not usually infect humans. It causes high levels of illness in pig herds, but cause few deaths. It can circulate among swine throughout any given year, but most outbreaks occur during the late fall and winter months, similar to outbreaks in humans. The true horror of the swine flu virus in humans and other animals is that it changes constantly. This change is why humanity hasn't been able to keep up with the strains and variations, especially as some jump from species to species. It is why the common cold will never fade. Pigs can be infected by avian influenza and human influenza, as well as swine influenza. Yeah, avian meaning birds, like you said.
Right.
When influenza viruses from different species infect pigs, the viruses can reassort or swap genes, and new viruses that are mixing emerge. A helpful example is when you genetically observe a person and see that it is a mix of that person's parents.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's okay. At this time, there are 3 main influenza A virus subtypes that have been isolated in pigs in the U.S. H1N1, which we know,
yep.
H1N2, and H3N2. I'm mentioning them in case anyone out there wants to look those up.
Okay.
To recap, swine flu is a descendant of the dreaded H1N1 Spanish flu and a skip away from a mix of avian and pig virus.
Oh, my God.
The swine flu is a variant that was first detected in humans in April 2009, and according to the CDC, evidence suggests that the 2009 H1N1 influenza virus has existed and evolved in nature for quite a lot of time before. And this is where it gets muddy because a lot of people were speculating into Roman times and how people complain about some things like that. And some other, like, long time ago, like from centuries where they weren't recording history. Right. Let's see here. Speculation as to this 2009 virus coming from a laboratory setting came around that time, but has been debunked since. Testing regarding H1N1 are done with chicken eggs, and that kind of evidence would have been seen in the epidemic that we're talking about. The adaptations of the swine flu does not match those of a lab setting, because a lot of people at the time in 2009 thought that it came from a lab because everyone said it's like the Spanish flu. We know that the CDC or WHO they experiment with infections in their labs, and they thought that one of them got out, but that's impossible.
That's what they're saying with Corona too, or COVID, that it might be lab made.
Yeah, it's not though. Okay. It's not. It's always out there. Yeah.
So that's what you're saying, that they debunked that theory.
Yeah, I gave this an example from Corona too. I put it in there. There's no real end to the swine flu. It has been normalized as its fatality rate has been reduced to little more than the flu and has been actually included in the flu vaccine.
Oh.
That's why we don't have it.
Huh. I did not know that they include that in the flu vaccine.
Yeah. Preventative measures is personal hygiene. That's it. Wow. Self-care for the virus are throat lozenges, menthol, which is an oil made from mint, which soothes the throat and relieves itching. And, rest, like resting, right? The cocktail of medication to fight the swine flu is not dissimilar from common flu. Cough medicine, decongestant, analgesic, maybe. Pain relief. It's pain relief. I'm not great with names. And then non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So not aspirin.
Right.
And also the key one is the antiviral drug, which reduces the virus's ability to replicate. As of now, right now, there are fewer than 20,000 cases in the U.S. per year.
Wow.
What
a reduction.
It is and no more deaths. That's the whole point. I mean,
and no deaths.
No deaths since that stuff
in 2009
because it's everywhere. The vaccine's everywhere.
That's crazy.
Or just take care of it.
There you go.
You can fight it off.
Modern medicine and soap.
I mean, it's in there. But you can fight it from killing you. That's my point.
So that's a couple points. It really seems like the chimera of viruses. Part pig, part bird, constantly evolving.
Makes sense. Pigs we eat, and birds are on the sky. They literally drop everything.
And the pigs eat it. Eat the shit.
Yeah.
That's nuts. And having it included in the vaccine, little side step here, but me and my wife were not anti-vaxxers, but
right.
we are anti-overloading children at birth. Yeah. In other words, if you follow the CDC's recommended vaccine schedule for a newborn, you're jacking them up with like 20 different foreign items by the time they're not even one.
Yeah.
So we said when our daughter was born 11 years ago, we said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to follow our own schedule, and we're going to get them shots when we feel they're ready for the shots. So we started my daughter at 7, and she's all caught up now. Thankfully, she's healthy as a horse. But I'll tell you, other friends of ours had children at the same time as we had Talia, my 11-year-old, who did follow the CDC's recommended vaccine schedule for newborns and infants and things. These children were in and out of the hospital. They were on nebulizers. They had ear tubes put in. They had respiratory issues. They had stomach issues. All side effects of vaccine injury, okay? My daughter, Talia, fucking strong as a tank as a child, and still is today. She never gets sick, this kid.
Yeah.
So for us, for our family, that was the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
My son, Nico, since it worked for Talia, we wanted to do the same for Nico. Well, the problem is today, in the world we're in right now, he's only 6, right? So we haven't started his vaccine schedule yet. So that makes me doubly afraid with this COVID scare of bringing something home to him. And not to mention my wife has respiratory issues. Asthma and bronchitis, recurring bronchitis. So anyway, we don't get the flu vaccine. We never have, probably never will. But knowing that swine flu is also included in there is very interesting and really makes you think, maybe this is something we should do,
Yeah.
So, and the fact that the thing is constantly evolving, you can only keep up with it so long.
Yeah.
Before a new vaccine is going to have to come out, right?
That's the
the perfect weapon.
And it's not just this, in a small way, Zika is the second cousin to other, things that mosquitoes carry or other kinds of animals carry.
Probably malaria.
Malaria is mosquito. Yeah, that's probably mosquito. I didn't search that one.
Yeah, no.
And there's some diseases that kill almost always, but they're hard to get them. Like you have to mix your blood in with someone or something.
You really have to try to catch that disease.
You have to really, right. And the ones that are easy to catch are the ones that want to, survive more. So they constantly mutate.
Makes sense.
But also you got to realize, Jay, this is where my personal lifestyle of I'm not saying I don't care about Corona. I do. I am careful. But I also don't harbor any anxiety over it. I don't worry too much about it. I don't go in drastic measures, is because this history lesson of today's show has reinforced that these things want to live. They don't want to kill the host. They accidentally kill the host when they're trying to live in us. And there's tons of things in us all the time. And we are generationally, adapting to each other constantly,
No, you have a good point.
That's why Corona seems bad now, but compared to 1918,
right.
like, that's why it was worse then. And God knows how bad it was during unrecorded history.
Right. You're right.
Right. People didn't even know why they're dying.
Yeah. Oh, look at Joe. Joe's dead. Let's go eat a grape leaf.
Well, if it's back then, they probably call him Joseph. But yeah, you're right.
Josephinian?
Josephinian. Yeah. Sorry. But that's what I got in Swine.
Sorry for the sidestep. But no, that was great. That was great. So you're going to grace us with another one. This one I have heard of. I mean, I've heard of the other ones, but I probably know more about this next.
This one's a super popular one. This is my biggest one. This is my tour de force.
Tour de force. Here we go. What you got for us, Oscar?
I got something called polio.
Oh, I'm sorry. You got polio?
If I had polio, it'd be a big problem. It'd be very hard for me to get it.
Okay. All right.
It'd be very hard. I mean, today.
Oh, today. Gotcha.
Super easy, like 70, 80 years ago, yes. But
let's hear
the
it.
full name. Polio's keyword. I have a keyword for everything. You know how swine flu, the keyword was influenza?
Yes.
Polio's keyword is paralysis.
Ooh.
And we'll get to it. Polio's full name is poliomyelitis. Poliovirus is a highly infectious disease that is spread from person to person, mostly through contaminated water. It lived in a person's throat and intestines. Only human beings are affected by poliovirus. Sneezing, coughing, fecal matter are what transmit also, and the disease thrives in hot weather. The disease primarily attacks children under the age of 5, and there is no known cure, but a vaccine does exist.
Yes.
Most people who get infected do not receive symptoms. That's 72 out of 100. And 1 of 4 with the infection have flu-like symptoms, such as, here it comes, sore throat, tiredness, headache, fever, nausea, and stomach pain.
Wow.
These symptoms will last to about 2 to 5 days before going away. A smaller portion of people with poliovirus will get more serious symptoms that'll damage, in particular, the brain and spinal cord. These are the 3 serious symptoms. Paresthesia, which is the feeling of pins and needles in the legs.
Oh, I've heard about, yes.
Yeah. Here's one that everyone knows. This is a word that everyone knows. Meningitis, which is an infection of the covering of the spinal cord and or brain.
That's right.
This is 1 out of 15 in the extreme. Now, this is the worst one. Paralysis, where one cannot move parts of the body or has weakness in the arms, legs, or both. This is 1 out of 200. Paralyzed limbs, such as arms or legs, waste away over time, which is the cause of deformed child legs, most commonly being associated with the disease of polio. Paralysis is the telltale sign, like the thing, the badge of its existence for a lot of people. You know, a lot of people back then, a lot of people today. Paralysis is the worst symptom that is married to poliovirus because it is the symptom that leads to permanent disability and death. Death via paralysis typically occurs because it affects the muscles that help you breathe.
Oh.
Make sense?
Shit. Yeah.
Yeah, you think like if you're just paralyzed, you can still live, right? But
that's
no.
Right.
If it's taking out muscles, you need those muscles to work the organs.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah.
I remember, just real quick, my father, I think people in our parents' generation as a whole, they were getting jacked with polio vaccines.
Yeah.
We don't do that now. We have it in a simple combined vaccine called the DTaP. That's diphtheria, polio, and pertussis, if I'm not mistaken, all in one. Too. But back in our parents' generation, they gave them a shot for polio with a massive fucking needle. I think it was multiple needles, and it would leave these gnarly scars on people of our parents' generation. I remember my dad's scar was about as big as a fucking quarter. And
this is the disease I was talking about. This is a big one that was in our parents' lives.
Yes. Okay. So it's bringing back the memory of my dad's gnarly scar. It was horrible. Not like that anymore, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. This disease was first written about by an English physician named Michael Underwood, who clinically described the disease in 1789. But it wasn't until 1894 that the first outbreak of polio surfaced in the United States and in Vermont with 132 cases. Remember, that outbreak is only the first majorly reported in the U.S. Published cases of multiple infected described an outbreak in Louisiana in 1841, which is before, right?
Yeah.
And a cluster in Boston in 1893. But otherwise, reports from U.S. and England before the 1900s are unknown. In 1916, a big outbreak occurred in New York City where it killed more than 2,000 people. A published Oxford site that reported on polio from a historical viewpoint in 2017 said that the infected number across the country was 27,000 with more than 7,000 deaths. This brought polio to a very serious and panic-filled level with the world and Americans especially. This little part, I left it for I put that on the written thing, and then I was going to give a little extract on the side.
Yeah.
This is where I read that people were historians. This is from the Oxford, right? But it's also from the American Smithsonian Institute, all this information I got. And I could have gone on a whole tangent on their historians saying that people describing things in the old times, like from Egypt to Roman to other places, describing the exact same symptoms that lead to the paralysis of polio, and saying that polio has been around for a long time.
Wow.
But history, that far back of history being what it is, it's impossible to confirm, which is why it'll just stay unconfirmed. But it is a belief of some people in those institutions that they felt strong enough to write about it. So
that this shit goes all the way back to Egyptian or Roman earlier, possibly.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's still, man. Okay.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And also, this is the closest. This is my last disease I researched, right? So this is the closest one that fills in for corona because the way we're shutting things down. It was a little harsher for polio, like the way everyone reacted to it. But same thing. It was like they had the social distances and the articles, and when they told the American public, they had the whole thing about stay at home. They had the whole thing. Yeah, they had all that.
They did. They had shelter in place.
They shut down parks. They shut down movie theaters. Yeah.
Didn't know
anyway.
that. Interesting.
All right. Let's see. Continuing here. The hot months, in particular late summer, were considered as polio season.
Wow.
Remember, this thing strived in hot weather. The peak of polio's rage came in the 1940s and 1950s, particularly 1952. That year produced 57,879 people infected with polio and had 3,145 deaths.
Mm-hmm.
The cause for less deaths, remember, because in the earlier number from 1916, it was over 7,000. This time is only 3,000. But the cause for less deaths during that year was due to awareness and efforts by various organizations and governmental support. So it actually helps lower the death toll, even though more Americans were being infected. Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, was instrumental in bringing awareness and help to those paralyzed by polio. The 32nd President of the United States became permanently paralyzed from the waist down in 1921, and in 1938, he helped found the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis. Before the vaccine was created, there were 3 major treatments humanity attempted to fight polio. And I got the 3 here. First is probably the biggest one. It's the iron lung. You've heard of the iron lung?
I've heard of it. I don't really know what it is.
Here it comes. First tested in Boston in 1928, this apparatus was powered by an electric motor attached to 2 vacuum cleaners and worked by changing the pressure inside the machine. When the pressure is lowered, the chest cavity expands, trying to fill this partial vacuum. When the pressure is raised, the chest cavity contracts, therefore mimicking normal breathing. It would breathe for you. It's a breathing machine.
Oh, okay.
The first one, I guess.
Wow.
The iron lung, it's called, because it was like an iron coffin.
That the person was in?
Yeah, it's like your lung is a piece of metal now, because metal, all this stuff helped you breathe.
Huh.
Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. The design, this design that they made for it, changed for the better over the years, and it did its part in saving many lives. It did save many lives. But it was terribly large and worse, expensive. $1,300, which equal to a house in the 1930s.
Holy shit.
Yeah, for one. Okay, so they move on to other treatments, right? As you can imagine. Here's another one for you. Passive immunotherapy. This is a serum that contained antibodies against poliovirus from the blood of polio survivors. Sounds pretty good, right? Between 1951 and 1952, almost 55,000 children were involved in a clinical trial that showed promising results. The serum was shown to be around 80% effective in preventing the development of paralytical poliomyelitis and protection for a time, I know.
Yeah.
Drawbacks for the serum was monitoring on a wide scale became problematic. The optimal time frame for administration around outbreaks was unknown, and the process was time-consuming and still very expensive. So it was at best kind of like slowing it down a little, you know?
Wow.
Even though it showed promising results, not everyone can be there for the clinical trial, right?
Right.
Last but not least, the third one works the best one. This is before the vaccine, mind you. The vaccine works better, obviously, but this is a good one. The Kenny regimen. Developed in 1928 to 1940, this woman named Sister Elizabeth Kenny in Australia developed a form of physical therapy to treat the paralytic aspects of polio before settling down in Minnesota. Her approach aimed to relieve pain and muscle spasms in polio patients through the use of hot, moist packs, early activity, and exercise to maximize the strength of unaffected muscle fibers. This promoted the neuroplastic recruitment of remaining nerve cells that had not been killed by the virus. The regimen became widely implemented everywhere. And in fact, it is a lot of why we have physical therapy the way we do.
Oh, wow.
It is physical therapy the first time.
No kidding.
Yes.
So that's
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what they were using, though, before this woman came on the scene was they would do the opposite of what she did. They would put splints on the limbs to keep it in place and then cast for months at a time. And then what would happen then, you think? Atrophy. People's muscles, even the healthy muscles that aren't affected by polio, would atrophy because they're still for months at a time.
Shit.
And that was the solution before this woman came around.
Incredible.
Yeah. Let's get into the vaccine. The medical doctor and virologist Jonas Salk, pretty well known name, Jonas Salk put forward a promising vaccine, and in the spring of 1953, the foundation, this is the FDR Foundation, rolled out a large-scale trial of the Salk vaccine, for which 1.83 million children in 44 U.S. states received either placebo or the vaccine shot. Salk's supervisor, Thomas Francis, insisted to introduce a control group into the trial design, and thereby pave the way for randomized controlled trials, which have become a very influential method in medical and social science research in the following decades. And have you heard of this?
I've heard of it.
It was invented from the polio, from this whole thing.
So say it again.
So this method I just described is new and is now implemented everywhere. I mean, the way you do clinical trials for testing to see if the whole thing giving like half of the placebo and half the actual medicine, like in a human trial to see if it works. Yeah. Like became super known and used after that. Sorry, it's a lot of stuff here. The foundation was supported mainly by donations from the American people who were collecting dimes, quarters, and dollars for decades in the hope of research finally uncovering a way to protect oneself from polio. Let's see. Oshinsky, 2005. This is the person that wrote it. Let me make sure. Even reports that the foundation received donations from 2/3 of the U.S. population, and a poll claims that more Americans knew about the field trials than about the president's full name, which at the time was Eisenhower. And if you're curious what his full name is, it's Dwight David Eisenhower.
Oh, that's what the D stands for.
Yeah. So more people knew about this Jonas Salk trials than his full name, the president's full name. On April 12, 1955, the 10th anniversary of Roosevelt's death, Francis announced that Jonas Salk's vaccine, was effective and potent in preventing polio. Within just 2 hours, the U.S. Public Health Service issued a production license, and the foundation prepared for a national immunization program. The conference had been live broadcasted to physicians all over the country who had gathered in movie theaters and watched the announcement. Millions of Americans received the news over the radio, spontaneously putting down their work in celebration of the news. At 10:30 p.m. on the same day, Thomas Francis and Jonas Salk gave a televised live broadcast interview in which Salk, when asked who owned the patents of the vaccine, famously answered, "Well, the people, I would say. There is no patent. Could you patent the sun?"
Try getting away with that today.
Well, it'll be commended today, but someone else will take it from them, is the point.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of this, incidence of polio fell 85 to 90% in the U.S.
Damn.
But that's not the end, though. In 1988, the 80s were in. There was an estimated 350,000 cases in 125 countries.
What?
Yeah. The World Health Organization, Rotary International, let's see, where am I now? Pan American Health Organization, the CDC, and UNICEF launched the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. Health workers managed to immunize 165 million children in China and India in 1 week.
Damn.
In 1995. By 2000, a record 550 million children received the oral polio vaccine, declaring the Western Pacific region, which spans from Australia to China, polio-free.
Huh.
As of 2016, only 3 countries remain polio endemic: Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria.
Oh, shit.
That's what I got.
Wow. I didn't realize it was still active that late in history. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Wow.
How much did you know about polio before? I know it's like well known.
Not that much.
Yeah.
Not that much.
I took a lot out. Like, there was this whole part because Jonas Salk is the original vaccine creator, but there was some other person that came in after to make a better version of it, because there was actually 2 strains that were happening and a lot of stuff. It became dramatic. I just think I excluded it because there's a lot of inerrity. So
yeah, no, it's fine.
But yeah,
you got all the important facts there. Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, we have one more pandemic to talk about, and that's called the Black Death. Now, I chose the Black Death not only because the name is metal as fuck, but because the death count is so staggeringly high, and the symptoms were just gnarly.
Yeah.
Now, the Black Death, or the plague, or the bubonic plague, or the Great Pestilence was a devastating disease that hit Europe and Asia in the mid-1300s. So we're talking late Middle Age era of history. The Black Death is called the greatest catastrophe to ever hit the world, besides maybe the Spanish flu of 1918, which we already talked about. But we're also talking about 2 completely different eras of history. Now, the Black Death arrived in Europe in October 1347, when 12 ships from the Black Sea docked at a Sicilian port in Messina. People gathered at the docks to greet the sailors and help unload ships, but they discovered something terrifying. Nearly all the sailors from all 12 ships were dead, and those that weren't were gravely ill and covered in black boils that oozed pus and blood. Sicilian authorities immediately ordered the ships back out to sea, but the damage had been done. The disease made landfall. Over the next 5 years, the Black Death would wipe out over 20 million people across Europe, almost 1/3 the continent's population. The disease would start to show itself when people developed swelling under the armpits or in the groin region or on the neck, something people called plague boils. These boils would grow to the size of an egg or an apple, and the boils would ooze pus and blood, and they would stink. Other symptoms of the Black Death included fever, chills, vomiting, diarrhea, terrible full-body aches and pains, and a very quick death. It was said a healthy person could go to bed and would be dead from the Black Death by morning.
You're kidding?
Nope.
Wow.
Very fast acting. Today, scientists believe the spread of the Black Death was due to it being both airborne and transmitted through the infected bites from rats and rat fleas. Rats and rat fleas, of course, are found in droves on large ships. Once off the ships, infected rats entered the population, and rat fleas would hitch rides on people's clothes, spreading death even further and even faster. But no one knew that at the time. No one knew how this thing was spread. Some people believed that the spirit leaving the eyes of an infected person when they died could infect another person just by looking at the sick person.
Yeah.
Others thought the plague was divine retribution from God, and the only way to appease God was to rid cities of heretics and fornicators and blasphemers. Therefore, thousands of people, namely Jews, were rounded up and murdered. Of course, this did nothing, and the plague raged on. And certainly no one knew at the time how to treat the Black Death. Boil lancing, soaking in rose water or vinegar, or burning certain incense were tried, but of course all had zero effect on curbing the spread. People tried to flee to the country to escape the sickness, but when they arrived in the country, they found still more sickness. Black Death infected cows, sheep, goats, pigs, and still more infected people. Meanwhile, infected ships made their way not only to Messina, but to France, North Africa, Rome, Florence, London, where the plague wreaked even more devastation. Eventually, the plague subsided, due in part, we believe, to improving sanitary conditions, and evolution in both humans and the plague virus itself. But all told, the Black Death is believed to have killed upwards of 20 to 30 million people worldwide in total. Now, a few interesting themes came out of this terrible pandemic. One of my favorite, the plague doctor. In case you don't know what a plague doctor is, think of that image of a person covered in a black cloak, carrying a cane, wearing a black hat and a mask, with a very long, pointy nose, almost like a beak, complete with eye holes covered in glass. It's an iconic image and really creepy, and I'll leave a link to a few plague doctor images in the show notes. Anyway, towns affected by Black Death would hire these plague doctors to come in and treat the sick and dying, and to take record of deaths. The infamous plague doctor mask, namely that long, weird nose, actually served a purpose other than being creepy. Most plague doctors would stuff aromatic herbs, straw, and spices into the mask's nose for a twofold purpose. One, to mask the horrible stench oozing off the dead and dying, and to protect the nose from sniffing up putrid air, sometimes called night air, which was believed at the time to be a source of spreading the Black Death.
Of course.
Some of these herbs and spices consisted of juniper berry, roses, clove, myrrh, and even some laudanum, an opium-like substance. And actually, fun fact, Nostradamus, the famous French astronomer and supposed prophet. He was a plague doctor at one time.
Of course.
Here's something else. The song we opened the show with, Ring Around the Rosie, that old children's nursery rhyme. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down, right? Should I sing it again?
No.
Many believe that that song came about during the time of the Black Death. Ring around the rosy is said to be, it represents a red circular rash that would form in areas before the nasty boils developed. A pocket full of posies is said to represent the flowers and herbs people would carry along with them to help mask the horrible plague smells. Or possibly they represent the items plague doctors would stuff into the beaks of their masks. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. It's said to mimic sneezing or coughing and literally falling down dead from the disease. Ashes, ashes could also represent the burning of plague victims, as was a common practice at the time. Now, no one truly knows if the Black Death is really this nursery rhyme's origin, but it makes sense. It could be. And when looking at the rhyme in this light, it's creepy as hell. And you want to talk creepy, this one's a doozy. The Grim Reaper. The skeletal, black-hooded, black-cloaked being carrying a nasty-looking scythe, right? Here's the crazy thing. There are reports from both Europe and Asia that people from towns ravaged by the Black Death would often see a figure standing just outside a town, wearing a black robe and carrying a scythe. And the scythe would emit a noxious gas or a fetid fog which could be smelled for miles. Then suddenly, everyone in the town would be dead from plague. It's thought that the image we conjure today when the Grim Reaper is mentioned stems from plague-infested Europe and Asia and the reports of the hooded figure carrying billowing scythes. Now I'll tell you, I knew about this story about the Grim Reaper and the plague for a long time now. Very creepy story. Last week, when our stay-at-home order began, when our shelter-in-place order began, it was either last Tuesday or Wednesday,
yeah.
I was sitting in my kitchen doing some work, and I was kind of zoning out and staring out into the backyard. And it was a really foggy day. And I just kind of watched this fog, this mist just rolling through the yard, and I immediately thought of this story. And I thought about the Grim Reaper bellowing poisonous fog from his scythe. And then I thought about COVID-19, and it chilled me to the bone. So that's the Black Death and some of the weird shit that came out of the Black Death.
Not to make it worse or anything, but I think it's pronounced scythe.
Scythe?
Yeah.
Scythe.
No, that's how it's written. So I'm pretty sure it's a scythe.
Scythe. Okay.
A scythe.
Well, the billowing scythe.
Yeah.
That's the first thing I thought of when I saw that fog being on mandatory lockdown. Very creepy stuff, man.
Yeah, it also shows you how much we were advanced, right? That we wouldn't necessarily say like, oh, it's the God's rage, or the Black Plague will come from this dude's dead soul eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There you have it. 6 terrible pandemics. A lot of death, a lot of destruction.
Yeah. I actually have an epilogue,
Oscar. Yeah, what you got for us?
Got a little thing for you at the end. I mean, are we done with Black Plague, or do you want to say anything more about it?
No, we're done.
Yeah.
We're done. Wash your hands, people.
Is this in correlation to bubonic, or that's a separate time thing altogether?
Same thing.
Same thing, right?
Black Plague, bubonic plague, the Great Pestilence, all the same thing.
Got it.
All the same things.
For some reason, I thought that there were 2 different things at some point in my head, but I know they made no sense. All right. Here it comes. Bear with me, folks. Viruses and infections is the way we pay for clustering together. With the dawn of the farming age of humanity came the need to build towns, villages, and cities. A person doesn't get sick all by themselves without the aid of countless more. One can say that Mother Nature is exerting her price and has been for centuries, if not for millennia. Quote. There's a quote, 3 lines. Mother Nature is a serial killer. No one's better. No one is more creative. Like all serial killers, she can't help the urge to want to get caught. What good are all those brilliant crimes if no one takes credit? End quote. Humanity fights these massacres sometimes slowly and at times dim-witted, but also with generational insight and at times miraculously. Look at our sanitation practices compared to 50 years ago, compared to 200 years ago. You know, if you think of it, swine flu, Spanish flu, black plague, right? From plumbing to hand sanitizer, we've learned from Spanish flu and black plague. We understand that a virus is a tiny creature that intends on surviving with its host instead of killing it, which is why most viruses have no cures, only vaccines or preventative measures. We adapt as they adapt. If no infections came from our filth and gatherings from, let's say, medieval times, we'd still be there. And think of how little in innovation and inventions there would be in the world today. Let's all learn and behave ourselves in respect to the very viruses that keep us alert and in check.
That was really good.
Thank you.
That was really good. Where did that quote come from about Mother Nature being a serial killer?
This might lessen the impact of my epilogue, but it's from a movie called World War Z.
I was just saying, you could edit it out if you want. But it was great. That was great. That fits so damn well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that epilogue, man.
Yeah, of course.
Well, listeners, I hope you enjoyed the show. I almost feel bad saying that because it's horrible stuff, but
we always talk about horrible stuff. What do you?
Fair enough. Hope you enjoyed the show.
Yeah.
Do your part. Stay inside. Don't catch or spread COVID. Keep your hands clean. Keep your loved ones close. And we'll catch you on the next episode. Oscar, take us home.
Sure.
Hands clean, keep your loved ones close, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Oscar, take us home.
Sure.